Hello there, and welcome back to The Disconnected, here with Jack Theakston from the 3D Film Archive. Jack, thanks so much for doing this today.
Thank you, Ryan. It's a real pleasure being here.
Well, the first thing, I don't think many people know who is behind the 3D Film Archive. So what do you do for 3D Film Archive?
Well, the 3D Film Archive, we have a lot of associates, but the 3D Film Archive is comprised mainly of our fearless leader, Bob Furmanek, who has been spearheading restoring 3D films going back to the mid-'80s and started this sort of project officially in the early '90s. Greg Kintz, who is our technical director, a real video wizard when it comes to taking the stuff that we get scanned in and realigning it and working on it. And then I'm the associate producer, and I essentially oversee elements of the restoration, make sure that things are being done in a way that we're going to have a good quality at the end of it. And that includes, sitting in on color grading sessions and overseeing digital scrubbing, digital dirt cleanup and dirt removal and that sort of thing. And then doing assembly and then delivering the product to our distributor.
That's a lot. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes on some of these companies like this.
Yeah, for sure. And I think a lot of people don't understand the time frames that we work with. I mean, once we get on the ground running, it's usually about 6 months between our production and the time that it goes to press. And then when it goes to press, that can be anywhere between like 2 and 6 months. But the pre-production elements on it, they can take years, literally. I mean, we've had a couple projects that it took a decade to get around to.
Well, just for yourself, how did you get related to the industry? How did you get in here?
I have been working in the business for over 20 years now. I'm a projectionist by trade, but I've also been a theater manager, and I've done film restoration since I was a teenager. I sort of studied or was I studied under the late David Shepard, who ran Film Preservation Associates and Black Hawk Films, and he had a lot of influence on the work that I do today. He put a lot of stuff out on home video back in the 80s and 90s and 2000s that got me interested in things like preserving silent film and preserving film in general and getting into lab work. And so I've taken it from there, and I've done a multitude of different angles in the industry. But as of right now, I'm a full-time projectionist in New York City.
Wow. It's a lost art, obviously. There's not something that is, carrying on that legacy everywhere like we used to have. How does it feel for somebody that's been doing it for so long, seeing, obviously, the changeover to digital was huge, but just the theatrical experience seemingly being less of a priority for culture nowadays?
Yeah, I think that's contrasted, though, by sort of the marketing that 35 millimeter screenings and film screenings get, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, a really great digital presentation does exactly what you want as far as a presentation should be as in projection, which is the number one mantra of any good projectionist is the best projectionist is the one that you don't even know is there.
Right.
And so if the digital presentation is done properly, that file is always going to stay the same. So it should be on the mark every time. And should be is obviously the key phrase there, because as a projectionist in the 21st century, you have to know digital first and foremost, and you have to know how to tackle and set up sites that are going to have digital installations and make sure that those are good. Make sure, there's a concept in a lot of people's heads that it's digital. You just set it and it's going to be that way forever, right? And that's never the case. No, you need somebody to come in like once a month to make sure everything's maintained properly, even if it's just changing air filters.
Well, that, and obviously we still have bulb problems across many of these theaters. There's so many places that are running on technology they've had in place for a decade plus now since the digital changeover that are just look awful in quality. It makes me so upset when I go to one of those.
Well, it's really saddening because who it hurts most of all are the independent cinemas.
Yep.
that really can't afford to keep upgrading their equipment every 5 years. The corporate chains, obviously, they can do whatever they want. They name their own prices for all that stuff. But in a good independent cinema where you're going to have probably more care in presentation taken by the owners, they just can't afford it anymore. It's becoming a losing value, especially with ticket sales diminishing.
It's true. And I mean, not only ticket sales diminishing, but Disney being Disney and forcing people out and all these.
Definitely. Yeah. And the other thing too is all this stuff is booked by territories. So if someplace opens up, even if it's like 200 feet out of past that territory line, and you can't afford to be the high bidder on that film, you're never going to get it the first week. And you're still going to be locked into a 2 to 3 week contract on titles.
Well, focusing more on 3D Film Archive, you all have been around, obviously, for quite some time, like you said, but nowadays it seems like the announcements are partnered with some of these other home video companies and are a title that you have been working on for quite some time, and just happy to see the project fully realized and released. What are some of the most exciting titles that you've been able to have a hand in over the years? Because there's been a lot worked on, obviously. Over
the years, or what's coming up?
Over the years. We'll start there.
Oh, boy, over the years. Well, the one that I'm still most proud of is one of our first releases, which we did through Flickr Alley, and it's called 3D Rarities. And it could best be described as a 3D short subject sample plate. It's got a little bit of everything on it, and it's got a lot of our most interesting discoveries, including some of the earliest known 3D footage going back to the 1920s, stuff that was shot in the 30s and 40s for public exhibitions like the New York World's Fair and the Golden Gate Exposition in San Francisco, and then a pretty good sample plate of stuff from the 1950s, including some shorts that went along with feature presentations that you're otherwise not going to see otherwise. So that's one of my favorites. And we did a nice follow-up to that called 3D Rarities 2, also through Flickr Alley. And that's got a really nice feature on it called El Corazón y la Espada, which is Mexico's first three-dimensional film, starring Cesar Romero and Katie Jurado. It's a nice swashbuckler epic, but then we bolstered it with a bunch of fun short subjects. And then as far as the features go, I mean, we've done over 30 releases at this point. It'd be hard to pick a favorite. I really love the stuff we did for Universal, Revenge of the Creature, and It Came from Outer Space. The Paramount titles that we did, I was really proud of the work we did on those. That would be like Hibaro and Sangaree and Ceasefire. And just a ton of stuff that we worked on. I'm really proud of most of it. I think the quality of our presentation has always held like a very high benchmark. And Guana Devil, one of our latest releases, I never thought we were going to see that one happen. And then here we have the original Ansco color camera negatives in our laps, and it just looks phenomenal. It looks like it was shot yesterday.
Well, when discussing 3D, obviously there's this bit of sadness for a lot of people that were steeped in 3D, a good 8 years ago, because we're not seeing 3D TV sold in the US. A lot of people are less aware that you can still watch some of these 3D titles with glasses and other ways that they can handle it. With the technology of 3D, if we can get technical for a minute, why is what the 3D Film Archive, why is it what... Let's see, what's the best way to say this? Why is the process differently than what other boutiques are putting into some of these negatives?
Well, because we have to do the same movie twice, essentially. Right. That's the easy answer. You have two eyes, one left, one right eye view on two strips of film. So already compared to a normal feature presentation that we'd work on, a flat one, we now have to double the budget because it's double the scan time. And then, of course, making sure that the alignment is correct on both eyes, because, you can't have one eye seeing slightly above the other. And when you push them apart, you have all sorts of weird things. So we make sure all the alignments are done correctly. But I think there's really nobody else tackling it with the same amount of expertise that we have. I mean, not to toot our own horns, but we were the only ones doing this in the first place. And we've gained a reputation for what we do because we really do understand the stuff and we take our care with it. And sometimes that's a time issue. You know, it takes a little bit longer to work on a project than it would for just a regular flat film. But I think the results speak for themselves, don't you think?
I mean, I personally agree. That's why definitely wanted to talk to you guys. Every time that the 3D Film Archive is attached to a title, I know it's one that I have to own because the quality is always immense. And usually, the more exciting part for me is it's usually a title that either like you've heard about over the years and nobody's ever been able to see because it's so obscure, or it's a stone cold classic that everybody has seen in lower quality. And it seems like those two ends of the spectrums are like, just funnel that right into my veins because it's the perfect way to appreciate this stuff.
Well, and that's why I really loved the 3D films from the 50s from the get-go. I mean, even before we were doing all this, Bob was doing screenings in 35 millimeter, which is insane, of this stuff from the 50s. And the beauty of it is it really wasn't a prestige format in a way, because that 1952 to 1955, you get this great cross-section of just every genre, every production budget schedule from 1953. You have prestige stuff like, you know, Kiss Me Kate or Miss Sadie Thompson, things that they're trying to push it as like a legitimate, like a grade A picture that's really going to play on Broadway for weeks. And then you just have like the bottom of the barrel, like Catwoman of the Moon, or like a Robot Monster, or you know, Hana Lee or something like that. And then everything in between, every genre that you can think of: film noir, science fiction, horror, comedy, musicals, westerns. My God, there were more westerns than science fiction films made in 3D, but most people don't tab it up that way. They remember Creature from the Black Lagoon or House of Wax or something like that.
Right. And then we get stuff like Buona Devil, and everybody's never heard of it, and then they see it, and it's like, wow, this looks amazing.
and then the question is, what is that? What is that genre?
Right.
It's kind of a horror film, kind of a drama, period piece, kind of a strange movie to come out of the gates with.
Yeah. With the 3D technology over the years, there are, you know, lots of advancements that happened. As somebody that is very ignorant to the whole process, because there were a few, as far as I know, there's a few ways that they filmed some of these. Are there more difficult ones other than the, you know, levels of deterioration? Is there anything in the filming process that made things more difficult for you to restore nowadays?
Not particularly. When it was the dual camera shoots, those are the best. The stuff in the 50s, because you essentially have like a full frame to work with. Once you move into the 60s and 70s with the over-under format, where they'd stack the right eye on top of the left eye in one 35 millimeter frame and present it at the same time, then you start getting into some tricky territory, because you get weird things like shading on the edges from the mirror boxes that they were using. And there's all this stuff in photography that we have to sort of unbake out of it, which is the magic sauce to what we do, you know. But for the most part, the 50s stuff is really well photographed and doesn't need a lot of work. Every once in a while, you get a shot that's out of phase or out of sync. That means, you know, one frame is being exposed after the other, so you're not temporally at the same time seeing the same thing. And it kind of looks like a watery motion. You know, if you flicker your fingers like that, you'll see it. And we have some kind of crude methods of removing some of that, but sometimes it's just baked in and you can't remove it. That was the case with Buona Devil, for example. There
have been some titles that you've done over the years that I, again, have never heard of, but the stuff that I've got is just an immense gift. And now I got to ask, how does a company like 3D Film Archive continue? Because it seems like no one is talking about these restorations at the level I want them to, because they're incredible. And some of these other companies that are out there, I don't know, the way they speak about struggling, and I'm like, well, the 3D Film Archive's been here forever.
Well, listen, I mean, metals are great for polishing and putting on display, but I think at the end of the day, our fan base is why we do it, because there are people out there who want to see this stuff. They want to assess this stuff. If you're a serious cinephile or a serious historian, that's a huge piece of the cinematic landscape that just has always been put down and put in the background, and really shouldn't be, because these were hard technicians working a really hard system and doing their best to present Hollywood films in this process, any more than like CinemaScope or Cinerama or 70 millimeter or any of that stuff. It has its mantle in the Hall of Fame, and now we have the way to show it to people. So why not?
Before you were with the 3D Film Archive, did you treat 3D like the art form that you see it now, or was it more?
Yeah, it always intrigued me.
Yeah,
I had VHSs of some 3D stuff, like Rhino had put out The Mask in 3D. I think Elvira was the host on that, and there was an old Good Times anaglyph of Creature from the Black Lagoon. It always intrigued me, and then I went to a few presentations in the theaters, hit or miss, and then I met Bob, and he was really hardcore about doing this stuff properly and doing it on film. And he also happened to have the greatest archive of all of these titles that nobody else had. And so there were these weekly screenings that he would run that were just, they were great. It was a great sort of debriefer on all this. And then about 10, 15 years ago, more like 15 at this point, we saw an opportunity where this format was coming out, 3D Blu-ray. Before that, we had messed around with 3D with the old, I don't know if you remember this, but there on the CRTs, there used to be a frame sequential system with shutter glasses. It was terrible. I mean, it was flickery, dim, but it was the only way to really see it, you know, kind of properly, short of setting up a couple of projectors and putting polarizers in front of that. And that's insane in itself. And that sort of led the framework for what we ended up doing on 3D Blu-ray. And then when the spec came out and manufacturers were manufacturing televisions and players and pressing 3D Blu-rays, nobody was interested in the stuff that we had on the table. I mean, we had a ton of stuff. We had features that we owned. We had features that we had restored, stuff that was ready to scan in. Nobody was interested. And our first release was really unceremonious. It was Dragonfly Squadron through Olive Films, and to say that it was sort of unrestored is being kind. I would really like to revisit that title down the road. But then Flicker Alley came to us, and they were serious. They wanted to do something that was serious. They'd been working with Dave Strohmeyer on the Cinerama stuff, and they wanted to do something that would be prestige, and that's when we did 3D Rarities, and that really was the start of the ball rolling. And then we started working with Kino Lorber. I think the first one we did for them was The Bubble, and they liked it so much that they brought us back for more, and we've had such a great relationship with them ever since. I mean, Frank Tarzi over there has been like our cheerleader and keeping us going with these studios for just years now. He's a real asset for us.
That leads into one of the questions I was going to have. Over the years, I knew of Olive Films, Flicker Alley, Kino Lorber. Are there many other companies that you guys have done home video releases through?
We've done stuff with Classic Flicks.
Oh, that's right.
We've done stuff with the studios. We did a couple of projects for Universal Home Video, and I'd have to go. Now you're asking for me to fire neurons that just aren't. We've worked with a lot of companies, yeah. And we've worked for hire for a lot of companies, too. So we've done some work with some other companies, like Vinegar Syndrome, I think, was one that we did some work with. And, yeah, we've done some work with some other companies.
Keynote seems to be the main partner nowadays. Is that still the case?
They've been our home base for a while. We've also done some releases with Bayview Entertainment. You know, we did Robot Monster through them, and we have a film coming out soon called Domo Arigato, which is Arch Obler's last 3D film.
There's so much about 3D that I would love to dive into. With, you know, you brought up the actual 3D Blu-ray format. When that came in, it was big in quotation marks for a little while. With the decay and the ceasing of the producing of the TVs, do you think that there's ever a chance for that to get big again in home video, or do you think we're past it?
I mean, I do trade shows every year, and I see what's on the floor, and so I have a pretty good idea of what the manufacturers are sort of getting to gear up for.
Yeah.
And now that the 4K train has obviously left the station, everybody's on board with that stuff. And 8K has been being pushed for a while now, but I just don't see it realistically happening anytime soon, just because of the data stream that you have to go through with that. Dolby Atmos has pretty much conquered the market as far as surround sound goes, and there's still sort of a battling HDR spec going on right now, but that's pretty minor in the grand scheme of things. I think you're going to start seeing 3D get dusted off again in the next few years, and the first and foremost thing that they have to do is standardize a 4K 3D spec, because as far as I know, that has still not been tackled.
That is the first thing I was going to ask, because I don't know anything about it, as if there was any sort of reason that they couldn't make a 3D 4K disc.
No, I mean, SMPTE has already standardized, for example, 4K DCP for theatrical projection. Right. It would just mean coming up with a spec and standardizing it for 4K 3D. But in order for that to happen, you have to have manufacturer interest. But for manufacturer interest, you have to have the standard. So it's kind of a chicken and egg situation right now. It's whoever shoots first, you know, basically one has to do it, and then we'll see it happen.
Well, I mean, I think that would be enough to reignite a lot of people's interest, obviously. I don't know how much you're paying attention to it, but the fact that we're still getting 3D Blu-rays, especially a lot more than the US, but happening overseas fairly regularly. Sure. Are those markets still fairly robust? Do you have an ear to the ground for that?
They are. We're locked into regions for the most part with the studio stuff, so we don't really see what that does overseas, although we have in the European market, because we've had a lot of people reach out for licensing Region B rights to restoration work that we've done. And that seems to have sort of a pretty good stronghold of people that are still set up with either 3D displays or projectors with 3D capability, which has sort of been the lifeline for 3D TV in general in the last 5 or 6 years, since manufacturers are getting rid or have completely stopped manufacturing both passive and active displays. So the projectors are sort of where we see a lot of our customers gravitating towards. And those tend to be people that have a home theater set up in the first place. So why not throw in 3D, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's the way I've been kind of leaning on, hoping that it's going to get there, is if we're already throwing in all these other bells and whistles, let's bring something back that people seem to love for quite some time.
And the technology is there. It really doesn't cost that much more to do it. If you're doing a passive display, it's using a certain type of LCD and also some chip software that's thrown in there as an extra. If you're doing passive, then you have to add an IR sensor, obviously, to reach the glasses. But, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, with the prices of monitors coming down tremendously, rolling in something like that for a couple $100 more for retail, it almost is like money on the table they're not grabbing.
Right. You brought up active and passive, and for those that aren't super familiar with 3D, can you share what the difference between those two are?
Passive would be Polaroid glasses. So the same, I thought I had a pair around here, but the same pair that you would wear at like a Real D screening in a theater. Right. Circular polarized, and the delivery on the TV set is a high frame rate, frame sequential system that's so fast it's imperceivable, but you get perfect cancelization with circular polarity. And then with the active glasses are the ones that are electronic. They're shutters that go on and off real fast using LCDs that are in sync with the player, and basically do the same thing, except it's an eclipse system rather than polarized.
So anybody buying any titles that the 3D Film Archive is putting out right now, they can still watch them on any player in the right way they want to watch them, correct?
They can, because now we are also adding as a feature, as of I think a year ago or 2 years ago, anaglyph versions on those discs. The red and cyan glasses they're paper glasses. We throw in a pair in each case. You can order some more. They're really cheap. You can get some deluxe ones for like $2 on Amazon.
Right.
And that way, if you don't have a 3D set, you at least can get sort of halfway there. You know, if you have if your set is calibrated well, especially in 4K, the anaglyph process that we use to encode it is way better quality control than what was previously seen on home video. And so you can get a pretty good estimation of the 3D with that stuff. I would say the best presentation, of course, is with shutter glasses or with Polaroid glasses. But if you don't have that option, don't worry. You can still watch the anaglyph version on your flat setup.
I've not considered this. Is it possible even to get a 3D TV to the States? Like, do you know of any way to import them right now?
No, but there's still plenty of them that are out there on the used market. I always tell people, go up on Craigslist, go up on Facebook Marketplace. You can grab, if you know what you're looking for, you can grab a great, like, 50-inch for, like, $300. If you are one of those madmen that still want to see the 3D stuff, there are still options out there. And I think before those TV sets start dying, you're going to see manufacturers start bringing it back anyway. So I don't think there's really going to be a dead zone as far as the technology is concerned for actually watching any of this stuff, if you're serious about it.
Nice. With Buona Devil, I think that's the most recent disc that's actually been released. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, that's our latest release, yeah.
Can you share a couple of the other ones that were right before that for everybody that may have not been paying attention?
All right. Let me go back in my brain cells here. I'm trying to think of what we had just before that. Robot Monster, of course. That's through Bayview Entertainment. That's a classic, crazy, cheesy science fiction film from 1953 where the antagonist is a guy with a gorilla suit and a space helmet on his head. Lots of fun. We loaded that up with extras, too. That was really a fun project to work on. Before that, The Man Who Wasn't There through Kino Lorber. That's a more recent release that we did. We did a few flat projects before that for Classic Flicks. Both seasons of the Abbott and Costello show, which we scanned in 4K off the camera negatives. It was a now or never situation. They were starting to deteriorate, and we worked with the Costello estate and scanned in and restored all 52 episodes. They look incredible.
That's so much work, too. I'm so glad that people like you were doing something like that.
It took us months, and it was a lot of sweat equity, for sure. A lot of sessions down in my basement with Bob grading episodes. Is this good? No, we could push it this way. We could go this way. Right. Another project that we did that was Abbott and Costello was their one of their 2 color features, Jack and the Beanstalk.
Yeah.
And we did that through Classic Flicks, and that is probably the project I'm most proud of because we spent so much time on that. That was a 2-year production, and that was in the middle of COVID on top of it. We loaded it up with a bunch of great special features. I mean, there's more special features than there is film on it, believe it or not. And that was really a love letter to Abbott and Costello and something for the fans. So that one I'm really proud of.
Nice. One thing that I try to ask, especially some of the smaller labels like this, is anybody that is, wanting to help. What is the best way to support the 3D Film Archive?
Just keep buying our stuff. We've got a Kickstarter for the Roadshow edition of The Bubble. We're calling it the Roadshow edition. It's the original Roadshow version of the film before it was cut for general release. And Kickstarter loved the project so much that they extended the campaign.
Oh, wow.
So you can jump up and get in on that soon. We're doing exclusive, I think Bob said we're going to do exclusive film frames from Stereo Vision for people, some actual 35mm frames. So if that's something you want to have up, in a display case on the wall, it's a great thing. We did that with the Abbott and Costello show too. People really seem to get a kick out of that.
Yeah. Man, that's great.
Yeah, just spread the word around and show people this stuff. If you have a 3D setup, have a party night, have people over. I do that here all the time, and people get such a kick out of it. I always have my go-tos for people who haven't seen 3D for the first time, so I'll go to that. But every once in a while, I'll have some friends over, have a dinner party, and then we'll sit down and watch something just out of left field, like Diamond Wizard or something like that, and they get a kick out of it.
Speaking of projects to support, you have announced more recently. I think the last one was Hyperspace.
Yeah, Hyperspace is on the plate. We just finished, and it will be out shortly. The Glass Web from 1953. That's a Universal mystery film with Edward G. Robinson. We're about halfway through Paramount Pictures with Money from Home, which is a Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis comedy that was shot in kind of a unique process. It was 3D Technicolor. And for those of you who know your film technology, Technicolor cameras used to run 3 strips of film through it at once, recording red, green, and blue light. So we had to scan in 6 strips of film and recombine them for this project. So we've been really careful about realigning it, making sure there's no registration problems, and then aligning the 3D on top of it and the grading on top of it. So this has been probably one of our most challenging projects to date.
I mean, that is so much. We talk about some of these older films being, closer to deterioration or needing the best restoration. But when you're talking about that and the prices increase, you can see why they don't get the love and attention they truly need right then.
No, and to be fair, and this is totally in credit to Paramount Pictures, they footed the bill for the scan.
Wow.
So they are treating this like a preservation project. So we're working really closely with them to make sure that this is done properly. And it's being done of course, in 4K too.
Jeez, that's fantastic. And now that we've got the most information out of that film, it will be preserved as long as we can. That's incredible work.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that we did out of the gate was we made sure that we were working in an HDR workspace.
Oh, wow.
And so the composites were done that way. The grade is going to be done in SDR, but it still looks tremendous. I mean, the 1080 of it that you'll end up seeing on Blu-ray is going to look perfect.
Other than just buying the discs, is there anything that 3D Film Archive ever does, like the Kickstarters, that is a general way for people to find you or follow along with what's happening?
Oh, yeah. Well, obviously, all our social medias. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that stuff. We're all out there. Just look up 3D Film Archive. You'll find us. But we do occasional Kickstarter campaigns, and sometimes they're for offbeat projects that aren't just restorations of films. Like we did a Robot Monster graphic novel this year, the Kickstarter for that did very well, so that's going to be out there. And the nice part about this too is it's employing a lot of people we know.
Right.
In the graphic novel case, there's a handful of artists, editors. This is not money that's just lining our pockets. We're paying people here, so this is making jobs. We're making jobs here.
Oh man, that's great. Future projects, anything that you can share that has not been announced or want to share with the world to get them excited?
Well, I mean, I am trying to hype people up on Glass Web and Money from Home. Money from Home is going to be a really great looking release. I think everyone's going to be really excited about that one. Domo Arigato is also on the plate. That's obviously something that if you're a fan of The Bubble, which is also another project we're going to do, they go sort of hand in hand. You can finish the Arch Obler trifecta of 3D movies after Buona Devil, of course. Domo Arigato is out the door. It's going to be going out to the Kickstarter patrons first next month, and then it'll be a general release in February for that. Glass Web is early 2025. And then Money from Home is summer of 2025, and Hyperspace is to be determined at this point. And then we have, I can't say anything yet, but I can tease it. We have a little interesting mystery project on board, but I guarantee everybody who's listening to this, and even the most hardcore 3D fans, it's nothing you've ever seen and ever heard of before, but it's amazing. It's really cool stuff. So I'm just going to set that there and tease that out, but we'll be announcing that probably in the next few months, and that is really exciting stuff when we get to it.
Jack, I don't know how to thank you for this. There's so much that I've adored about 3D throughout the years. This has been an enlightening conversation for multiple ways. The last thing I was going to ask, for anybody that doesn't know like the history of 3D, do you know of any great resources that they could go to find just the technology, all the films that have been done in 3D, anything that would get them excited about what you're doing?
There is a book that is in the works right now. It has not been published yet. It's in the middle of being edited. And it's by a very talented writer by the name of Mike Ballou. And forgive me, Mike, if I mangle the title of this one, but I believe his tentative title for it right now is So Close You Can Touch It, or Close Enough to Touch. And it is going to tell the complete history of 3D films. He has interviewed many people that never got interviewed. He's dug and dusted off files that never saw the light of day when they got stuck in archives. It's going to be the complete history of the format. There's also, as far as resources go, our friend Eric Kurland runs 3D Space in Los Angeles, and he's always doing demonstrations out there, screenings out there. So if you're in the Los Angeles area, definitely look that up. The National Stereoscopic Association has had us at their convention almost every year. They have a great resource, including Stereo World magazine, I believe is the one they published. Forgive me if I got that wrong. Yeah, there's a bunch of resources for just general 3D stuff. As far as 3D filmmaking goes, there have been books published in the past, and they've been hit or miss. There's a book called Amazing 3D that's now out of print by Dan Sims and Hal Morgan. That's a great formative starting point. There's a book called 3D Movies by R.M. Hayes. Take that one with a grain of salt. There's a lot of misinformation in that, but that gives you at least like a general checklist, I suppose. But yes, if you're really interested in the subject matter, definitely keep an ear to the ground for Mike Ballou's book coming up soon. That
sounds incredible. There's been a lot out there, but like you just mentioned, there's been some misinformation. I would love to have just the definitive book on the shelf.
For sure. I mean, when we started, there were so many films that people thought were in 3D, but they weren't. And now things are starting to get muddy in the waters because there are a lot of AI conversions of 3D titles being done, and they are really tremendous. I mean, I've seen a number of those, and when it's done well, it's done really well. But I think it's going to confuse some people as to what is native 3D and what isn't.
Yep.
So having a good master checklist, I think first and foremost, is important.
Jack, again, thank you. This has been incredible. I can't wait to see what people think and share this around, because every time the words 3D Film Archive is just associated with the title, I get excited because I know it's going to look great, and I hope people feel the same. Pleasure's all mine. Thanks for having me, Ryan. Thank you for watching The Disconnected. On the way out, make sure that you are subscribed to the channel, that you've liked the video, and that you've copied the link to be able to share it with someone else that may appreciate this.